The Washington Commanders finished the 2024 season with a 12-5 record and made the playoffs for the first time since 2020. The preseason win total for the 2024 Commanders was set at 6.5, and any fan of this team would have been thrilled with a 7 or 8 win season, as long as there was visual improvement throughout the course of the year, and that Jaden Daniels showed promise for 2025 and beyond. But nobody in their wildest imagination would have thought that the Commanders would not only have 7 wins by November 3rd, but go to the NFC Championship game in Jaden Daniels' rookie season. Inevitably, when a team has this type of success in a quarterback's first year, the expectations for the second season and beyond are going to be incredibly high. And the big question for the 2025 Commanders is, how far can they go this year? Can they go back to the NFC Championship game? Can they take it a step further and get to the Super Bowl based on the offseason additions they made? Or was this the furthest they'll get out of any of the next couple of years? Well, we're going to break down the 2025 Commanders in today's video. We're going to break down offseason moves, the NFL draft, both sides of the football, and even take a look at their schedule too. And before we start, if you could like the video, I would really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing where the Washington Commanders are in their franchise's timeline. And one thing that will be noted several times throughout the video is that the Commanders are in a very specific win now mode. And despite both teams losing in the conference championship last year, Washington and Buffalo are in two different situations. Obviously, the Bills can win the Super Bowl in any given year, and nobody would be surprised if they did. But the big difference between the two franchises, and several other franchises for that matter too, is Jaden Daniels is getting paid very little compared to any of the elite quarterbacks. His cap hit in 2025 is $8.5 million compared to Joe Burrow having a $46 million cap hit, or Lamar Jackson having a $43.5 million cap hit, and you get the point. So for the next few years, Washington is in a really good position because Jaden Daniels is effectively getting paid pennies on the dollar for the production he brings to the franchise. And this is why we've seen Washington bring in guys like Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, and Marshawn Lattimore through trades over the past year. Internally, they know this window is short, and this window is of course referring to Jaden Daniels' rookie contract window. For clarity, we're not saying he can't win a Super Bowl if he continues the pace he's on, but based on his rookie season, it's a fair assumption this is the cheapest contract he will have throughout his entire career. And for what the trades were, I absolutely love the Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel trades, and we'll break those down more during the offensive portion of the video. But for as much as I love the Tunsil and Deebo trade, one move Washington made this offseason that I did not like was giving Javon Kinlaw a 3-year, $45 million contract. Now, what matters, of course, in NFL contracts is the guarantees, and this is effectively a 2-year, $30 million contract, and a lot of the time on the channel, we say that if you're giving a big contract in free agency, and it doesn't affect somebody currently on a rookie contract getting paid, then by all means go for it, but I thought this was bad value for Washington, as Javon Kinlaw has never been a good player in the NFL, and I thought money could have been allocated elsewhere. They also brought back Marcus Mariota, and I really like this signing and the prioritization of a backup quarterback, given how much Jaden Daniels runs and inevitably is going to take hits, especially with a very mature quarterback who has been around for a while and is also going to provide any mentorship for Jaden too. They also brought in safety Will Harris, who spent 2024 with the Saints after spending the first 5 years of his career in Detroit. What has to be remembered for Washington is, with the trades they made, that in a lot of ways this was their free agency, at least from a money standpoint. So having said that, they were never going to be all that active in free agency, at least relative to other teams. They did lose longtime defensive lineman Jonathan Allen to the Vikings in free agency, but it is worth noting with Allen that he only played 8 games last year as he missed time due to a partially torn pec, so I would argue this loss isn't that big because Washington already played without him for extended time. Not only that, but Allen was not dominant in 2024 and was not close to the player he was earlier in his career, at least not in 2024. Washington also lost receiver Dyami Brown to the Jags, safety Jeremy Chin to the Raiders, pass rusher Dante Fowler to the Cowboys, and corner Benjamin St-Juste to the Chargers. Chin and St-Juste played a combined 1,800 snaps in 2024, so that is a lot to fill as we head into the new football season. Now, for the rest of the defense, I'll be honest, I have questions as we enter 2025. I don't think they're going to be one of the worst units in football this year by any means, but I do think there is a lot more questions than answers. And while Dante Fowler certainly isn't a Myles Garrett type player, he finished second on the team in pressures with 44 last year and also had 10.5 sacks. And the story of the 2024 Commanders was how good Jaden Daniels was and how he elevated the football team, as it should have been, might I add. But I really question who's going to get after the quarterback consistently this year, and that is one of my biggest concerns with the 2025 Commanders. Now, I do acknowledge Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner each had a good year last year, and that a lot of the time they held the defense together, but honestly, a lot of the time it was bend and don't break. Bobby Wagner is now 35 years old, and that has to be noted as we head into 2025. I really think the corner room for Washington has one of the biggest variances out of any team in the NFL for a few reasons. Slot corner Noah Igbenogany played the most out of any year of his career by far in 2024 with Washington, and they brought him back on a one-year, $1.5 million deal, and I thought that was a great signing by Washington. But can he be relied on again after playing more than 300 snaps for the first time in his career last year? We'll see. And remember, he was serviceable. He wasn't elite by any means, and given that he is entering year 6, well, I'd be surprised if he turns it on and becomes a high-level player. Everyone would. Now, I think Marshon Lattimore is one of the players this fanbase is most split on at this point, because I think you can view him in any way you'd like, and you'd have evidence to support that. He only played in 5 games for Washington last year and looked good in the New Orleans game and the Detroit game, but was picked on against Tampa and against Philly. I know officiating may not have went Washington's way on a couple of plays involving Marshon Lattimore, but with him specifically, this is a player who has played in just 26 of 51 possible regular season games over the last 3 years, and that has to be noted entering this year. I also really like Mike Sanderstill and loved him as a prospect coming out of Michigan, but I don't think he's going to be an elite CB1 where he can make up for everything else. Now, the reason I said I think Washington's corner room has one of the highest variances of any team across the NFL is because you can talk yourself into Sanderstill and Lattimore having good seasons, and even Noah Igbenogany building off of last year, and also have second-round rookie Trey Amos into the mix as well, and say to yourself, this can be a really good secondary in 2025. But that's just one part of the defense. The Commanders also finished 28th in rushing yards per attempt against in 2024 and were 30th in rushing yards allowed. And we all know what happened in the NFC Championship game against Philly, but in Washington's final 6 games of 2024, meaning from Week 16 through the NFC Championship game, this team allowed an average of 169.7 rushing yards per game, and that is one of my biggest concerns and what I think could, and ultimately will, limit Washington in 2025. I don't want to take away from their playoff wins over Tampa and Detroit. That's not what I'm trying to do, but they forced 5 turnovers against the Lions in a do-or-die game, and again, enough credit cannot be given, whether it was with the Quan Martin pick 6 or the Sanderstill interception right before half, but my main concern is the sustainability over the course of a 17-game season on both sides of the football. Positively for Washington, I love the Johnny Newton selection last year when it was made, and I thought they had a considerable draft steal for how early in the draft it was. I thought Newton was a top 12 player in the 2024 class, and I really do think he will step up this year, and that was another reason why I didn't particularly like the Javon Kinlaw signing, both from what they paid him and from who they already had on their roster. I hope I am wrong about the 2025 Commanders defense, but I do worry about this team if they're in a position where they have to make not just one, but multiple stops in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, which is bound to happen throughout a football season. Everyone knows the Commanders wildly overachieved in Jaden Daniels' rookie season, and as someone who lives in the area, I could not have been happier for a fan base that desperately deserved it after everything they went through during the Dan Snyder era, but I do think the defense will limit this team this year, and that there was a reason they finished 26th in defensive DVOA in 2024, meaning that did not happen by accident. And heading into 2025, at least defensively for Washington, I do think there are more questions than answers. Now, one thing that needs to be established with the 2025 Commanders draft class is reasonable expectations. It would not be fair to expect Josh Connerly, Trey Amos, Jalen Lane, or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a 7th round running back, to come in and have the type of impact at their position that Jayden Daniels had at his position in his rookie year. And what I also think does not get discussed enough by the national media is just how good the 2024 Commanders draft class was outside of Jayden Daniels. Mike Sanderstill had not one, but 2 playoff interceptions, and anytime you can have a rookie corner have a playoff interception en route to not just one but multiple playoff wins is obviously huge. And they also had decent production from a rotational defensive tackle in Johnny Newton, who I do think will take a big step in 2025, and they also had 3rd round offensive tackle Brandon Coleman come in and play over 1,000 snaps combined between the regular season and the playoffs. So to have a left tackle and a 3rd round left tackle with that come in and play that much and not be a complete liability, yes, Brandon Coleman certainly had his lowlights, but to not be one of the worst tackles in the league and ultimately go to the NFC Championship game in your rookie quarterback's first year, well, it was a really successful draft class. And by the way, I also do think Ben Sinnott will take a step in 2025 too, to only add on to what was an impressive 2024 draft class for Washington. Now, with the 2025 draft class, I really like the value that they had on Josh Connerly and Trey Amos, and out of all of the 32 team previews that we're going to do, there's not many where the exact value that I had with a player aligned with where they were selected. But on my pre-draft top 150 big board, I had Josh Connerly at player 29, and that's exactly where the Commanders selected him. Ironically, I had Trey Amos at player 30, and it was also very rare on the big board where we had a team select players back to back, one right after the other on my personal big board, but that is exactly what happened with Josh Connerly and Trey Amos. And I do expect Trey Amos to not necessarily play all that much at the beginning, but as the season goes on, I expect him to have a much bigger role as the year progresses. And he's going to have to play because you're in a division where you have receivers like Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, now George Pickens, AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith. So for not only the Commanders, but really any other team in this division, if you are selecting a corner early in the value alliance, by all means go for it. But specifically for Washington to draft Trey Amos at the end of the 2nd round and received what to me was around a plus 30 draft value was one of the better value picks in all of the 2025 draft. And I think Trey Amos is a jack of all trades, master of none type corner where he can tackle well, he can cover well, and he has back-to-back years in 23 and 24 between his time at Alabama and Ole Miss of good quality corner tape. And anytime you have not one but multiple years, well, guys, I really do think Trey Amos will be a good player in the long run, although there may be a bit of a log jam at the corner position early in his career. Now, I know we talked a lot about Trey Amos and his projection with the team and kind of glanced over Josh Connerly aside from where I had him on my big board, but I think this is going to be a player that will eventually become an above average starting tackle. It just may take him a little while to get there. His play strength right now is a little less than you would like for a 1st round tackle, but I think that's fine because of having Jayden Daniels as your starting quarterback. Now, obviously we don't want Jayden or any other quarterback running for their life, but if Josh Connerly gets bull rushed right in the Jayden Daniels lap, if we know anything about Jayden Daniels, then we know he has the athleticism to get out of situations like this. This also isn't to say that Josh Connerly is a complete liability at tackle and that Jayden's going to be running for his life every single play, because that's certainly not going to be the case either. But I do think there are some play strength concerns that can absolutely be alleviated over time. Connerly is a really athletic tackle, and he's a guy that I think fans will come to appreciate it over the course of time. And by the start of the 2027 season, after he goes through maybe half a year of seasoning in his rookie year and starts to really build on that at the end of 2025 and 2026, I think this will prove to be a very good selection for the Washington Commanders in the long run. Remember, they did only have 2 top 100 selections, so I would not expect that much from Jalen Lane as a rookie, and if he pans out, great. But outside of Connerly and Trey Amos, guys, this is the reality of winning a lot of games and going to the NFC Championship game. Naturally, you are going to have less impactful rookie classes because you are selecting at the end of every round, and also combined within this, the fact that the Washington Commanders traded for Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, and of course Laramie Tunsil, that is going to limit what they can do. So for now, in the 2025 season specifically, I do think in a lot of ways it is a 2-man class between Josh Connerly and Trey Amos, though I do have hope for 7th round selection Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and hope that he can make the roster and contribute occasionally out of the backfield. With the 2025 Commanders offense, I think opinions at times are all over the place because I think there are some people out there that want Jayden Daniels to not necessarily fail, but definitely be brought back down to earth. But this was a player who finished 7th in MVP voting as a rookie, and outside of Terry McLaurin was throwing to guys like Zach Ertz, Olamide Zaccheaus, and you get the point. It was not an offense where he was throwing to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and everybody else where he was going to come in and naturally light it up. Jayden Daniels, in a lot of ways, was the offense. Now, I do have some, not necessarily concerns with that, but some things that I do think need to be noted moving forward, because I don't think it's sustainable for Jayden Daniels to rush for 900 yards every year for the rest of his career, and to hope that at 210 pounds that he doesn't take a one really hard shot to set him out for a couple of weeks in which the Commanders would go 1-2 or 0-3 during that span. Jayden Daniels obviously had a tremendous rookie season and took the Commanders to the NFC Championship game for a reason, but a lot of his game, at least from a passing standpoint, as simple as this sounds, was taking what was in front of him. He didn't put the ball in harm's way more often than not, and a lot of the time, as simple as that is playing quarterback, is taking what's in front of you, take the 6 or 7 yards, and move on. That's also not to say that he was a check down Charlie, but you get the point. Jayden did not put the ball in harm's way, and if he did that as a rookie, I don't think that's going to change in 2025, as he showed what he has to do to succeed at the NFL level, and now that we have that baseline, I don't think it's as simple as, hey, now that defensive coordinators have tape on him, they're really going to figure it out, and he's going to throw 14 interceptions this year, and the Commanders are going to go 7-10, and they're going to miss the playoffs. I don't think that's the case, and I think Jayden Daniels really set a baseline for who he will be in 2025 and beyond. Admittedly, I do have two questions with the 2025 Commanders offense, and they are around the run game and the interior offensive line. Now, a lot of the time on the channel, we usually discuss the fact that rarely is it one person's fault, and a lot of the time it's always a combination of things, and I think this is going to be the case with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler in the Commanders run game in 2025. I don't think Brian Robinson is a bad player, I just don't watch him play and think that, man, this is a top 8, 10, or 12 running back, and I don't think he's very good, and I think he has a very limited ceiling as to who he can be in the Commanders offense. Now, positively, I will say that this is a contract year for him. Obviously, players tend to play up in contract years, so positively, if you want to leash onto that and say that, hey, Brian Robinson might rush for 1,000 yards and he could be a really, really effective player and be the running threat that the Commanders need outside of Jayden Daniels, by all means, go for it. But I have a lot of concerns specifically around the team's interior offensive line, and it is unfortunate that Sam Cosmi, who is a really good player, unfortunately tore his ACL in the divisional round playoff game against the Lions. But their other guard, Nick Allegretti, is a player that I have questions around. He is not a good pass-protecting offensive lineman and allowed the most pressures on the team last year with 37, and anytime you have pressure go directly in the face of your quarterback, whether that player is Jayden Daniels or anybody else, there's going to be a cause for concern there, especially when a quarter of your schedule is against Jalen Carter and Dexter Lawrence. Now, it is definitely worth noting the Commanders finished top 5 in every major rushing category in 2024. Rushing attempts, yards, rushing touchdowns, and yards per carry, of course, but whether that player is Jayden Daniels or Lamar Jackson under center, obviously the rushing numbers are going to be significantly skewed for a team like Washington versus a team like Atlanta, who was quarterbacked by a combination of Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, yet had a 1,400-yard rusher in Bijan Robinson. I did at least want to note that moving forward, but I do have a lot of concerns specifically around the ground game that does not include Jayden Daniels. Terry McLaurin, I know there's a lot of talk right now around the contract and everything. I do expect him to play in 2025, and I also think that a contract will be worked out, and this is Terry McLaurin's really last time of his career where he'll get an opportunity to receive the true generational wealth where he could get $30+ million, because Terry will be 30 years old this year. He was drafted as a 24-year-old rookie coming out of Ohio State, so despite only being in the league since 2019, he was a very old rookie, and this is why there will probably be some difficult waters to navigate during contract negotiations, but ultimately I do think everything will be worked out. Now, regarding Deebo Samuel, there's been a couple of videos recently that have surfaced about Deebo Samuel looking a little thicker in the lower half than you'd probably like, but we are at the end of June, early July. I don't think that's going to be a problem, and for Deebo Samuel specifically, even at his peak back in 2021, what needs to be remembered is he was never a John Ross or a Xavier Worthy type player at his peak, so So I don't think there is a lot to be concerned about pertaining to Deebo Samuel, and at the end of the day, Washington traded a 5th round pick for him. So for the production they'll receive from Deebo, which in my opinion will be anywhere from the 600 to 800 yard mark from a receiving standpoint, and probably an additional 100 to 200 yards from a rushing standpoint this year, I think everything will be just fine, and I think that the videos specifically servicing of him will prove to be a moot point by season's end. I really like the addition of Deebo Samuel because of what that represents for Jaden Daniels. He's a good player to work underneath. He's a guy to get the football in his hands, to get the ball quick out of your quarterback's hands, and to let somebody else take those hits that you would not want Jaden Daniels to receive play after play after play. Relative to the schedule they had last year, I do think the 2025 schedule is a little more difficult, but I think there is a reality where this team starts out 4 or 5-2 before they really get into the thick and the meat of their schedule. Now, the final 6 games before the playoffs start are going to present a challenge for Washington, and in some ways this is almost like a playoff schedule before the playoffs start, and that's why I think the Commanders' ceiling this year is going to be kind of limited. Their final 6 games off of their Week 12 bye are home against Denver, at Minnesota, at the Giants, and I know some people may roll their eyes with the at the Giants thinking that's a difficult game, but the Giants are going to present problems for the Commanders specifically because of how good their defensive line and pass rush is compared to the Commanders' offensive line. So there's a very real chance that the Giants win that game, 13-10, 16-13, and give the Commanders a tough loss in December right before the playoffs start. After the Giants, then they have 2 of their final 3 games against Philly, and that's obviously a difficult challenge in itself, and they close out their schedule versus the Eagles, versus the Cowboys, and then go to the Link in Week 18. And as Commanders fans know, there's a very real chance that Week 18 game at the Link could be for the NFC East. Ultimately, when a team overperforms the level the Commanders did last year and then expects to take another step like they were supposed to this year, I have questions. I had questions regarding the Texans last year, and ultimately they lost in the divisional round, and that's about where I think the Commanders' ceiling is this year. I have a lot of concerns with the defense, although I think those questions can be answered, but pass rush is one where it's going to be difficult for me to truly buy into this team, as well as the interior offensive line. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 43% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.